Thank you. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is the Democratic Caucus. It's May 2nd. Thank you all for being here. I have just a few quick announcements, and then we're going to go to some bill reports. First up, today is the complicated day on the floor. So the rest of the week will be pretty straightforward and simple. We will gavel in at 10 in the morning each day this week, and then we will recess for committee work and things coming over from the Senate. And then we will come back, gavel back in at 3 o'clock. That's going to be every day this week, 10 and 3. So be prepared for that. Jill wanted us to let people know committees of conference are meeting clearly now. The budget committee of conference has already met at least once. Schedules will be posted. I actually didn't confirm this with her. I meant to, but typically we do post committee of conference schedules on the door of the speaker's office. We'll see if those are going to be there, but they will be posted on the General Assembly website. So look for that. Attendance is super critical right now, folks. If you have a quick meeting with someone outside the building, even, you should let us know, because we need to know who's going to be in the building when, and we need you in your seats all the time. So please keep us informed if anybody has to go, and try really hard not to go. Thank you. One other thing, I think I mentioned this last week, I'm going to say it again. We still may need to be here in person on Monday the 8th. So heads up, please be prepared to actually be in Montpelier on Monday the 8th. This is not confirmed yet, but it is actually looking a little more likely right now. So I asked this morning about when, and I got confirmation that it is much more likely that we will be meeting in the afternoon, not in the morning. So if that helps anybody, hopefully it will. And that this will be confirmed by the end of the day, is what I've been assured. So if we are going to meet on Monday the 8th, you will get an email from the speaker's office. Everyone in the body will get an email from the speaker's office letting you know. So, but I think you should be prepared for that next Monday the 8th, that you'll need to be up here. Things are winding up and winding down. So winding up so we can wind down. So we have a few bill reports, and I am going to call up on about S-135, the Vermont Saves program. Representative Byrong is going to give us a little rundown on that from the GovOps committee.
Happy Tuesday, everyone. Giving everyone a quick rundown on, as Emily said, S-135, the Vermont Saves program. I want to start with a little backstory real quick. In 2017, the legislature, in coordination and great effort with former Treasurer Beth Pierce, created a program called Green Mountain Secure Retirement. And it was structured in a very similar way as to what we're doing here. So you might ask yourself, so why are we doing this? Shortly after this went into effect, Green Mountain Secure Retirement, the Federal Treasury and Commerce Departments changed some rules that actually essentially made it impossible to implement that. So now Treasurer Pichek is picked up on this concept. And that is the bill we have in front of us now. So what this does is the treasurer's office will put together about 5 or 6 vetted Roth IRA plans, and employers who don't offer any type of retirement structure like that, retirement planning structure like that, will make available to the employees the ability to access this. Now, it is being structured that the employees are automatically opted in. They do have the ability to opt out. It begins with a contribution of 5%. The employees have the ability to lower that percentage if they want, or opt out of the plan, as I stated. Real quick breakdown on the IRAs themselves. That money is taxed on the way in. It is not taxed on the way out. Now, this conversation is included in the bucket of what in the pre-COVID days, there was a lot of talk about portable benefits. This is like a concept that includes family leave, paid sick days, things of that nature, where it is structured outside. It's a benefit structure program that exists outside of your employer. So if you take a new job, you move, those benefits are retained as you go from job to job. You don't lose these benefits if you decide to go work somewhere else. We're taking some more testimony on this afternoon. We hope to vote it out this afternoon. And I'm available for questions now and questions later.
Kurt Taylor from Colchester. If you work for an employer first who does not have a program, so you set it up with the state and then you change to an employer who does have a program, can you still contribute to the state program?
Yes.
Thank you.
Hi, Julia Andrews. Thank you, Rep. Byron. I was wondering if this is something that will be made available to people who are self-employed as well.
Yes. See, the question was, what is the on its journey? There is an appropriation, so it goes from us to appropriations. I don't believe there's a Ways and Means component to this one, Madam Chair. Is it? Okay.
Thank you. Tristan Roberts, Halifax. Can you just sum up in a couple sentences what this enables that, you know, a self-employed individual or small business can't do on their own now?
So there's a lot of data right now that suggests, and this is all coming sort of from the days of the Green Mountain Secure program. There's just a lot of difficulties getting these plans in place and accessible to employees with smaller employers. There's a lot of administrative barriers, just time constraints. Putting on my small employer hat, attest to that. I've been working on this since Treasurer Pierce and Green Mountain Secure Retirement for those reasons. So it's accessibility, but the portability is really like one of the biggest benefits of this. So you don't, you have this like link, right, with the fund to an employer, but if you move, how do you move the fund? How do you roll it over? More complexities. It also acts as a savings account to a degree. There's other like financial benefits to the individual, not just building in more of like a societal structure where, you know, we're becoming more prone to savings for retirement as opposed to less prone, which the data shows structurally within our workforce, people are less prone to save than they used to be, and that those numbers are not heading in a positive direction. All right.
I'm so excited about this bill. Thank you.
Yeah,
I've
me
like
too.
had employers where I like had this retirement thing and then I left and I had like no idea what I was supposed to do with it or how it worked. And now that I'm self-employed, I like don't have the bandwidth to figure out how I'm supposed to save. And I know that I'm a person who can handle paperwork and bureaucracy. And so I can't even imagine how much more overwhelming and confusing it is for other folks. So I'm just, the Ways and Means Committee has like asked the treasurer about this every year for years. And I'm just so excited the program's moving forward now. Thank you.
Thank you for the sentiments. That's it for this. If you have any other questions, please grab me at any point.
Thanks, Representative Byron. I won't repeat what he just said. You already know it. Okay, so up next, Representative Wood just walked in the room and Representative Kornheiser are here. So we're going to take up S56 financing. I don't know if you
Great. Yes. Hi, everyone. I am here to talk about S56 and particularly the financing for S56. That is the child care bill and our next step in making affordable, accessible, high quality child care transformative changes in the state of Vermont. I don't think I need to tell you how important it is that we do this work. I think that case has been well made this year. I think we all came in to the biennium with childcare and the transformation of the childcare system, one of our top priorities. Every week there is, new articles and new stories from our constituents about and adorable young children in our caucus with us, pointing to how important it is that we have a system that works for all of us and how much we don't have that system right now. So the Human Services Committee has done incredible work and has shared with you about that work in terms of sort of the two key legs of the stool here. So in order to have affordable, accessible, high quality care, the accessible part is making sure that we have enough spaces for kids to access that care. And in order to do that, we need to raise the wages of the folks working in the early care and education system. That's also the key way we get quality care. The affordable care part is how we structure how families pay in or have their childcare covered by the Child Care Financial Assistance Program. So the bill, as it came to the Ways and Means Committee from Human Services, has a lot of really great policy work in it and grants and all these pieces that Teresa and Jessica and the Human Services Committee can explain to you. But essentially, there's two huge levers in it. One of them is making sure that folks who provide early care and education receive a lot more resources for that. And the other lever is making sure that families are not paying too much for that care by subsidizing that care through the Child Care Financial Assistance Program. That is a federal program, but if and when this bill becomes law, a lot more of the dollars in that Child Care Financial Assistance Program will be coming from state dollars than federal dollars. It will essentially be a state program at that point. So all that to say, I think we all came into this biennium, into this session, knowing that we need to make transformative changes to our early care and education system. And those transformative changes do not come for free. We knew that we would need to raise revenue in order to make those transformative changes to our early care and education system. And so those changes are going to cost somewhere in the vicinity of $100 million a year. The transformative changes that we are making in FY24 are covered in the budget. And then from there, we're scaling up and new revenues will be needed in FY25, FY26 and onwards in order to make sure we have an affordable, accessible, high quality system that works for all, as we promised Vermonters with the passage of Act 45 in 2021. Now, the system and the system changes we are making are going to benefit folks in different ways, right? So there's the folks who have sort of primary benefit from it, like first level benefit from it. That is the families that are accessing that care, right? The children that are accessing that care. And then there's folks who are going to have sort of secondary impacts from it that are incredibly important. And we've heard a lot from businesses who want to make sure that families have high quality, affordable, accessible care so that their employees can focus on their work. We know that the folks working in the system are going to have a primary benefit from it, but folks working in the K-12 system are going to have secondary benefits from that work, right? Because kids who have access to affordable, accessible early care, high quality early care, we know have a smoother ride through the K-12 system much of the time. And so the elementary school system has sort of secondary benefits, or grandparents have secondary benefits from an affordable, accessible, high quality system. And then all the rest of us who might not fall into any of those buckets also benefit from this, right? We know that that means we will have a high quality focused workforce. We will have folks who are providing care who are adequately compensated for that. We will have one piece of our system that is not held together with duct tape and baling twine, right? And that is a public good, right? Making sure that our kids are cared for in meaningful environments is a public good. And so I went through that little lecture for you all on sort of primary, secondary, and public good benefits, because I want to talk about the values that your Ways and Means Committee brought to a decision about the fiscal package we're going to put forward to fund early care and education. I know it's a little geeky, but I think it's sort of helpful to set it up that way. So we had sort of a few key values. We want to have a broad base to ensure that we have stable funding for affordable, accessible, high quality care. I'm just going to call it care from now on so that you don't have to listen to me say that over and over again. And so that broad base ensures stable funding because we know this is such an important part of our overall system of care in Vermont. And with a broad base, if there are different changes in the economy, they can be absorbed by other aspects of the economy. That's sort of core to a high quality tax system. We want to have it be relatively simple so that both filers understand what's happening and the policies can be easily administered. And because this is an issue that has gotten so much press and so much conversation, and we've heard from businesses so much about it, we want to make sure that we can communicate what we're doing. We had an expectation that beneficiaries would be paying into the system for fairness, but that we also have both horizontal and vertical equity in our system. So horizontal equity is what we usually think about when we think, vertical equity is what we usually think about. I always have to like draw the horizon in order to tell those two words apart. Vertical equity is what we talk about when we talk about a progressive tax system. That means that people who have more ability to pay, pay more, and people who have less ability to pay, pay less, because the impact on someone with less money of the same tax rate is, more. So a progressive tax system, which is what we have in Vermont and have had for a long time, has great vertical equity. Horizontal equity, and that's sort of the key to why we made some of the decisions we did in our financing package, means that folks in different circumstances, but at similar sort of financial levels, would also all pay equitably. So that means that the way you earn your money, and we've already, at our last presentation, we talked about self-employed people versus non-self-employed people, for example. The way that you earn your money, whether you're a business owner or an individual, shouldn't influence what tax bracket or how much you pay. Does that make sense? And so what we wanted to do was to design a tax package that everyone is paying into fairly. And since we heard from so many businesses about how important this was to their bottom line and how much they wanted to make sure that businesses were paying their fair share of this, we wanted to design a tax package that has both horizontal equity, progressive, and vertical equity, depending on how your business is organized. You pay. I switched them again, didn't I? That's why you're smiling at me, David. Thank you. And so, anyway, long wind up, not simple wind up. It's my first time doing the full wind up for you all, so appreciate comments after the fact. So what we're planning on doing is a progressive increases across all corporate income tax brackets. We did a lot of reform to our corporate income tax last biennium. We increased our minimum tax a lot on our corporate taxes, and we made sure that tax flight is very, very hard in Vermont with the way we restructured our corporate taxes last year. But essentially, we're seeing a progressive increase on all corporate income tax brackets. That means that they're all being increased, all 4 brackets, but the lowest bracket is being increased a little bit and the higher brackets are being increased a little bit more. Only some businesses in Vermont pay their business taxes on corporate income taxes. Super tax geeky, but the majority of businesses in Vermont are not corporations legally. They are LLCs and partnerships and a whole bunch of other things that most businesses you're familiar with are structured as. Those businesses pay their taxes through something called a pass-through entity, which means they just pay their business taxes as personal income. So we also added a progressive increase on all personal income tax brackets. And then, so we get horizontal equity, meaning by doing both the corporate income tax and the personal income tax, no matter how your business is organized, you would still be paying business taxes. And by building those structures progressively, we have the vertical equity. So we have those two progressive increases on the personal income tax and the corporate income tax. So we have a broad base. Everyone is paying in, no matter how your business is organized or no matter how you gain income. And then in order to hold a few folks at sort of the bottom and the top a little bit harmless for this, we are expanding the earned income tax credit to 100% of the federal tax credit for claimants without children and 55% for claimants with dependent children. And because of the way the federal EITC works, that means that we'll sort of be bringing those credits up to be almost the same as each other. And so that sort of helps the folks at the bottom be held harmless for this. And then in order to soften this for income earners at the top, we are putting in place a provision to basically enable a certain amount of personal income taxes that are paid on pass-through taxes that are paid at the state level to then be refundable at the federal level. Sometimes that's referred to as SALT or the pass-through entity workaround or all kinds of things. So we're adding that too, so that will basically businesses in Vermont will get federal dollars for taxes that they pay in Vermont. So super simple, super straightforward, really easy to explain on a Tuesday after a long training, but that's the scenario. Essentially, what we wanted to do is make sure we were having the broadest base possible so that we could have the smallest rate increase possible for each person who is paying in for this public good. That's the long and short of it. We want to make sure all businesses, however they're structured, are paying in, and all individuals, no matter how they're earning income, are paying in. And so that's why we created these sort of broad bases. It's an increase in our corporate income tax and an increase in our personal income tax. And that's the end of the story. Questions? I'll send graphs around, and there's like a lot of PowerPoints available on our Ways and Means page that you can go check out. Patrick Titterton's been doing a great job with us.
Hi, Mark Mahaly. Great. This is really great. I love the mix. One thing I just not quite sure I understood is the income tax going to go up progressively for all income taxpayers or only pass-through taxpayers?
The income tax is going to go up for all taxpayers. By a very small percentage because
Hi.
we have such a broad base.
Sorry, Jonathan Williams, Berry City. Could you clarify the, did you say that childless couples will pay in more than couples with children? I'm sorry.
No, so one of the ways we are sort of softening this package is with an expansion of the earned income tax credit. And the way the earned income tax credit works at the federal level is it's higher for folks with children at the federal level get more money back in the earned income tax credit than folks without children. And our earned income tax credit piggybacks on the federal earned income tax credit. And so Vermonters get a percentage of their federal credit as a state credit. And so we're increasing the percentage of the federal credit that folks without children can access, and also increasing the percentage of the folks with children can access, but not quite as much. So that at the end of the day, actually the tax credits for those two populations should actually be more similar than they are now. Yes, it's just for, no, the earned income tax credit is for lower income folks. And the income thresholds are higher for folks with kids for it.
Just to clarify, there's no duplication in when you look at this tax structure based on corporate and income. There's no individual paying twice.
No, there's no double taxation. You have to use the mic or you're going to get in trouble.
Okay. Trouble's
Not
my
with
middle-
me. I know trouble's your middle name.
Trouble
but
is my middle name.
The
Yeah.
at-home audience won't hear you if you don't use
Okay.
the mic.
One of the things I didn't hear you say is that we are not repealing the child tax credit.
Oh, thank you so much, Teresa. So your House Committee on Ways and Means and our entire caucus, and I think most of the House, did some really amazing work last year in passing a significant child tax credit for the first time, following in the footsteps of some really great work by the feds. And we are just seeing the returns on that. We are absolutely working to protect that child tax credit and making sure it's available into the future. And if you want to look at Committee of Conferences website on the budget or the Ways and Means Committee page, we've received a lot of testimony from folks all over the state asking us to ensure that we retain the child tax credit because of what a difference it's made for Vermont families.
Hi, this is Rep. Austin from Colchester. I'm wondering, when I was on the school board, we would get a pretty good report of projections of birth rates for the next 10 years into the future in order to plan for resources and facilities. I'm wondering, do you have a rough sense of the projected birth rate for the next 10 years?
I have a vague memory of someone asking that question in committee and someone else answering it, but I do not have an answer off the top of my head right now. I can get back to you. I don't know if anyone from Human Services has that question off the top of their heads. Okay.
Carrie Dolan from Washington too. One more question. You mentioned about you would be focusing on capacity through looking at wages. Is that how would we actually accomplish or achieve increased capacity just solely on the basis of wage increase?
I'm going to have Teresa answer that because that's her committee's theory of change right there, though I agree with it.
Thank you. So the S56 increases rates paid to providers by 38.5%. And there is legislative intent language regarding how those resources are to be used with regard to wages. And also language that reflects something called VASI work, which is Vermont Association for Education of Young Children. They have been working on Raise the Profession or something like that. They've got a whole campaign about early educators and implementing pay scales for early educators. And so we reference that in the bill. And we have, a very strong evaluation component in this bill that Building Bright Futures will be doing to check back on things that, what our intent is in the bill to see that those things are really happening.
Hi, Phil Pouch. Thanks. This all sounds really good. Will we get some examples on the scale? So, somebody $50,000 or $100,000 or an LLC that makes 150,000, the percentage that we might expect. So will we be able to see those? Or are those developed from the Joint Fiscal Office?
We have a bunch of graphs up on our committee website. We've been working through this. And so some of the graphs need updating and they're being updated right now because, like I said, the vertical and the horizontal equity are both part of a person's tax filing status. one person making $50,000 a year is not the same as another person making $50,000 a year. And so I want to make sure that the examples cover that range, but absolutely, I'm sorry, I don't have them with me today for you.
Okay, thanks. We look forward to it.
Hi, Scott Campbell from St. Johnsbury. The Senate bill included sort of a limited paid leave component, which I gather is probably no longer in the bill from the House side. Is that correct?
The Human Services Committee took out that limited parental leave
Yep.
strategy from the bill. I just want to answer with a little bit more detail about Phil's last question too.
Sure.
The bottom two tax brackets are held completely harmless with these increases because of the combination of the earned income tax credit to the package.
Okay, well, it's probably a larger question, but I guess I'm wondering what happens if the Senate doesn't take up the paid leave that we passed here.
I believe that is a question for another day
Yeah, for
because
another
today
day,
I am
yes.
here to explain our childcare financing package.
Hi, Representative O'Brien, Tunbridge and Royalton. Representative Kornheiser, how does this work with interstate, Vermonters working, say, Tunbridge and Royalton? A lot of people work at Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Center, Dartmouth College, Hypotherm, that sort of thing. So how does that equity work when your company is out of state?
So a corporation, I guess in both cases, we have a whole system built into our tax structure having nothing to do with anything we're doing in this bill that apportions tax to both where you live, where you work, and where profits are earned. So corporate taxes, for instance, are apportioned in Vermont under current law by the percentage of revenue that is earned through sales in that state. And so with the example of Dartmouth Hitchcock, I know that there's a certain amount of Dartmouth Hitchcock revenue that's actually, they're not a corporation, so it's not really the best example, but a corporation that's making sales in the state that's on the other side of the border would have a percentage of their revenue that was allocated to Vermont that would be taxed. And it's sort of similar for the cases of personal income taxes, essentially. It depends on where you live, where you work, and it's apportioned from there. It also depends on what the other state is, because different states sort of protect their rights to their revenues in different ways from each other. But there are folks who spend some period of their time in Vermont and they are due, they have taxes due on that. This is another plug for our amazing 4-part every session tax workshop. If you really want to dive deep on all these fun issues with me, we are there at the beginning of every session with you and JFO to do this stuff. Okay, thank you.
No one likes tax policy more than Representative Kornheiser. No one likes it more, I said. I didn't say no one likes it. I just said no one likes it more. So we have two, if you have any questions, and you probably will, because this is a lot to take in. But if you have questions, please see anyone that you heard talking already today, and or anybody on Ways and Means or Human Services to help you out with this bill. This is really important. I've got 2 more bills. I'm going to call up Representative Priestley to talk briefly about H81, which is the right to repair, which was both in ag and in commerce. And then we'll follow up with S100, where I have Representative Stevens and Representative Bongartz both speaking next on that.
Hi, everybody. Representative Monique Priestley from House Commerce. Here to talk about H81, the right to repair for agricultural and forestry equipment. And I'm going to try to be quick and only go over changes that we made that we're proposing as a strike all amendment based on the ag version of the bill. So just as a note, Colorado passed a first ag bill recently. We would be the first to add forestry. Representative Templeman gave the initial overview on the bill as it came out of ag. And changes that Commerce has proposed to a strike all amendment include adding some context to the beginning of the bill to let people know why this is important, findings and a purpose. We removed duplicative definitions of trade secret from the bill, as there's already state and federal definitions of trade secret. We gave more protections to the consumer. We condensed multiple cost portions into one so that for the ease of reading for people, the general public. And then due to concerns from the industry, we added a limitation section that Colorado had in their bill, because often when we were in hearing testimony, people were kind of like picking at safety concerns of people doing their own repairs and or emissions that could violate federal emissions laws. So more or less just added the limitation section from the Colorado bill that basically say that people can repair their own equipment, but they still need to adhere to local, state, and federal safety and emissions protocols. And when the strike law amendment came out of Commerce, it was voted favorably 10-0-1. I don't know if anybody has questions.
She's running, so I don't think. All right, so I'll call up the other two, Representative Baumgartz from Environment and Energy and Representative Stevens from House General are going to share with you S100, our bill regarding housing.
So a few things. Number one, just to keep in mind, this was an omnibus bill that came over from the Senate, and it's an omnibus bill. It ended up being the kind of bill that had two committees of jurisdiction, had jurisdiction over different parts of the bill. The Committee on Environment and Energy had jurisdiction. Let's just say, I actually haven't looked at which sections, the first half of the bill, the first 25 sections. And the Committee on General and Housing had jurisdiction over the remainder of the bill and the other half of the bill. And there's a lot of important stuff in there that Representative Stevens will talk about. So I want to just hit very quickly on a handful of things, and then in particular, some of the key portions of the bill. But we received an estimate from Vermont Housing Finance that just to keep up with our existing housing needs and sort of projected needs of people who might want to be here, and a little bit of vacancy rate of needing somewhere between 30 and 40,000 units of additional housing within the next 8 to 10 years. So it's not so much to focus on that 30 or 40,000, just to give you a sense of what the size of the challenge is. And if we're going to try to build that number of units in Vermont, I think it makes some sense to say that the place that makes sense to do it is in downtowns, because the alternative is sprawl. And if you do it in downtowns, you're also providing people walkability and access to services and building up vitality in our downtowns. So that's one of the underlying principles of this bill. And the portion that the Environment and Energy Committee dealt with was largely, although not exclusively, but largely about municipal zoning. And one of the realities of zoning has been, and we heard a lot of testimony about this from the people who build housing, is that the zoning can have, but not, and by the way, I always say, I believe this was always unintentional, but the reality is that some of the zoning, especially the zoning holdovers that we have from 30, 40, 50 years ago, end up having discriminatory impacts. Because when you have large lots, excess parking requirements and those kinds of things, it makes it much more expensive to build in downtowns. And therefore therefore it's harder for people of low and moderate incomes to live in downtowns. And you end up with the phenomenon that I think all of us are very familiar with, where so often people who work in, let's say, the service industry end up living 30 miles away from where they work because they can't afford to live anywhere near where they work. And you find them driving in and all the expense and everything that comes with that. And so one of the things that this bill does is really try to eliminate some of the barriers to building housing, denser housing in downtowns. And let me just go to what I think are some of the key tenets of the bill. And by the way, I want to also say that this bill is not in and of itself is not going to cure the housing problem in Vermont. What it does is make it easier, identify some of the things that are barriers that make it difficult to build housing and tries to move them out of the way. It won't solve everything, but it will, we believe, have an impact and make it easier to build housing, especially in downtowns. But I think there's five key tenets to this bill. There's more, but there's 5 key tenets. One of them is to allow greater density in downtowns, and especially those downtowns that have municipal sewer and water. And just to be specific for you, what the bill says, there's more to it than this, but in the first instance, the core principle is that in areas in downtowns, in areas that are either village centers, designated downtowns, growth centers, neighborhood development areas with sewer and water, you can build, the towns must allow at least a minimum of 5 units per acre, much denser than in some downtowns now. It reduces excess parking requirements and says that towns in these denser areas with sewer and water can only require 1 parking space per unit. The developer could build more if that's what the developer wants to do. And outside of those districts, it goes to 1.5 parking spaces. So it's really trying to not have the car dominate and use up, especially in these denser areas, valuable real estate and also money that could otherwise be going toward housing. This is what those 2 things were identified by the people who build, especially affordable housing, as being 2 of the key things that they see as impediments to being able to build housing in Vermont, especially in our downtowns. The bill allows those in those areas with sewer and water to, if you're building affordable housing, to be able to go up an extra floor. And because it kind of makes some intuitive sense, right? You have your foundation in the roof already, and the way to build housing, or at least a way to build housing, is to go up. You're not using any more land. It's more efficient. You can get more housing into the same building, and your dollars can go further. And so that was another element that was identified by people trying to build, especially affordable housing, as being an important element that they wanted to see in this bill. Another key to this bill is that anywhere in Vermont, you can build a single family home, you can build a duplex. 1 foundation, 1 driveway. It makes, from an environmental perspective, you're not using up any more land, you're not using up any more services or things like driveways, and you really get effectively 2 units where you would have had 1. And it's also for those areas that are not on sewer and water, this is the place that the bill really helps those areas. And it's also fundamentally a way for many people an entry into the middle class. You know, have a duplex and then have the other person in the other half of it help pay your mortgage. Classic way for people to gain access into the middle class. And by the way, this isn't just about new buildings. When we talk about duplexes, it may end up being that what we really see are houses that are too big, where we have people, too big meaning that a couple is still living there after their 5 kids are all long gone, but they can't go any. That's one of the phenomena we heard about. It's there's people are staying in houses that are too large for them because there's no way to go. And so it may be that when we talk about duplexes, we're not sure how this will play out, but it could be that we end up having these houses divided, be it by floor or side by side, whichever way the configuration works. And so the duplex language could actually end up being existing buildings being turned into duplexes, or duplexes being built. And the 5th, I think, key pillar to this bill is called the by right provision. That's BY, not BUY, by right provision, that really says that if the zoning ordinance says that you can do A, B, and C, when you get to the zoning hearing, that can't be whittled down by neighbors putting pressure on the zoning board to, let's say, if you were allowed to do 6 units an acre, if that's the way the ordinance read or whatever it was, then neighbors come in and put pressure on the zoning board and ends up getting whittled down to 3. So rather than have 6 houses, you end up with 3. And what this says is that if the zoning ordinance says you can do 6 You can do 6. The zoning board can't whittle that down. So what it means is that towns better be, that your ordinance better mean what it says. So, and having said all of that about these, those 5 key, what I think you could say are key tenets of the bill, a lot of towns are headed in this direction already. And what this does is really just move it along and get the job done, and then put us in a position with all of the ARPA money we have and everything we're trying to accomplish with housing, make it happen that much more quickly, because having things happen quickly is kind of the essence here. A few other quick changes I'll mention. There are 2 Act 250 changes that last for 3 years. At least you have to be permitted within the 3 years, and then 3 years to build them. So in a way, it's 6 years, but in terms of getting it's 3 years out of the to get the permits. We have probably all been hearing, all of you in the room have been hearing about the 10-5-5 requirement in Act 250, meaning that if a developer builds 10 units within 5 miles within 5 years, the 10th unit triggers Act 250, and then Act 250 review of any even single unit built after that. There was a rationale for that being in Act 250, and in some ways, and we didn't really get into whether there still is or not. There was a rationale for that being there. But what we did is we said that if we have decided in part with this bill, and we've been doing this for years in this legislature, trying to do smart growth and get development into downtowns. We said that if it's in an area, in a designated downtown, a village center, an NDA, neighborhood development area, etc., that it can go to, for 3 years, it can go to 25-5-5. So a developer can actually build 25 units before triggering what would have been the 10-5-5 rule. So that's a significant alteration. And the other one is that in designated downtowns, growth centers, and NDAs with sewer and water, all of which have to have sewer and water. That's not true. They don't all have to have sewer and water. Designated downtowns, growth centers, and NDAs. We've also eliminated the cap on priority housing projects. And priority housing projects it's a technical term, but it means that of the units built, at least of them 20% have to be affordable. And if you're doing that, there used to be caps, there are caps. If you're a town of 6,000 or under, for instance, right now, the cap is 50 units. So up to 50 units, you don't have to go through Act 250. Next level up, I think, is 10,000. I forget what the cap is, might be 75, and then there's something over that. What this bill does is for 3 years, eliminates caps altogether for priority housing projects, as long as it's in a designated downtown growth center or an NDA. I'm going to largely stop there, except to say that there are a number of studies in this bill as well. I'm not going to go into them. I'll go into them on the floor because it'll take too long. But one of them that's well, they're all worth noting, but I'll just mention one, which is setting up a commission to look at rural capacity. And there's more to it than just rural capacity, but helping the rural areas of Vermont build capacity and be able to compete for all kinds of things. And it's also about planning and then state investment and kind of getting attention to the most rural areas of the state. And we'll go into that more on the floor, but I don't want to take that too much time. Yes.
Thank you, Seth, and thanks to the Environment and Energy Committee for their work on this. It truly was to have an omnibus bill this early in the biennium is always very difficult, especially when you're dealing with some, in our case, money related issues, because a lot of the housing programs that we've been developing over the last several years have had substantial investments in them, but they've also been operated as pilot programs or have been used by, funded by federal money. And we're now contemplating using our state tax dollars for these housing programs that in our way of how we give out money, we always try to require that there be some payback in some way, whether it's social, whether it's financial. In the case of housing, when we develop housing through grants given by VHCB or federal tax benefits given through VHFA, we tend to ask for or demand that there be perpetual affordability, which means that this apartment, this unit, this house would always retain an element of affordability throughout its life. And so when we start developing programs that are going to using tax dollars, general tax dollars, and using private developers specifically trying to provide subsidies to help them, give them a tool to help develop during these really crazy times when it comes to the inflation in real estate in particular, which of course affects rental prices. So when the bill came over, we got it first and we dealt with the housing issues, but the housing issues in the bill had been deleted by the Senate Appropriations Committee. So it was primarily a land use bill actually when it came over. And so what we endeavored to do with our section of the bill before we had to get it to them 2.5 weeks ago was to reinstate the policies that we agreed with from the Senate committee as it passed the committee. And that's going to create a little bit of confusion on the floor because I'm going to talk about things like the middle income housing program or a revolving loan program that would have been for $20 million to help developers develop rental units. And they all had carrots and sticks attached to them. Those two programs were added in because we felt it was important to have the conversation to let people know that we were contemplating them. But those, because the money that's in them was not in the appropriations bill that we passed, nor was that the money in the appropriations bill as the Senate passed, that chances are that money won't be used or those programs won't go into effect or continue this particular year. But we did focus on programming, and you'll see that through a number of the sections in our bill. But what we did focus on was really trying to match up what we put in our appropriations bill. So there's a thing called the VHIP program, which we've talked about before, which is the housing investment program, which takes units that when it first started, it was just taking units that were offline and allowing property owners to apply for this money to give them a boost to bring these units back online and that they would be available for people coming out of homelessness or people at a certain income level. We were proposing to continue that program. It's expanded a little bit so that if a property owner in our proposal, so a property owner has accessibility issues that they want to deal with or weatherization issues that they want to deal with, they can apply for these. And some of this money will also apply to people who want to develop accessory dwelling units, formerly known as mother-in-law apartments, if they're offering them under the way that the bill has always been structured, either a grant or a loan. What we are doing as well is that information. And again, there's a couple of studies in there that I won't go into detail now, but they're aimed at trying to make it easier to build or more affordable to build through building codes in particular. But what we did once we passed the bill on to the Energy or the Environment and Energy Committee is we did our own amendment that's going to end up going in to the appropriations bill, just the way that our process works. And this is my rant against omnibus bills. If we had the bill in the right way, in the right process from the beginning of this, and this was not intentional per se, but money bills should start in the House. And so this money stuff, we couldn't work on, by the time we had to get the bill over to the other committee, we couldn't work on the things that we wanted to add to the bill, which filled a hole that was not present in the governor's proposals, which was to what are we going to do when the hotel programs, or more specifically to our amendment, when the rent stabilization money runs out at the Vermont State Housing Authority. That's been funded by federal funds for the last 3 years. It's been highly successful. It was more successful in the first year when there were less strings attached to the money. But the Vermont State Housing Authority, in different levels of rental subsidies, whether it's to help people move by providing first, last, and security, whether it's helping landlords deal with damages done to their properties, or whether it's actually rent to help people pay rent, because there are going to be some people who leave this program where 100% of their income is going to be required to pay for their living expenses. And so what we're proposing are 3 pieces here that will help alleviate that, we think, with one of which is a rental arrearage program, which is $2.5 million that will be used to help people pay for back rent. VSHA will recreate the original program to make it more accessible to landlords and tenants alike. The VRAP program, with all the federal strings attached, made it very difficult to have equity with who can access the program. And so they're going to rewrite their rules so that they will go back to the original program. Second piece is a pilot program for full representation for tenants when there's an eviction proceeding. I'm sorry, the 2.5 million is for non-payment of rent specifically. This pilot program is for any eviction purpose. It's going to be, the proposal is to go into Lamoille County and Windsor County and provide attorneys for tenants who are given a notice to quit, who are entering into the eviction or ejectment process. This is something that we've been hoping to do for many years. We've took testimony from the judiciary, from other folks who have really said, having an attorney at the beginning of this, rather than having tenants approach this from what's called a pro se basis, will help. And the third piece that we have is funding 2 positions or so at CVOEO in Burlington, which runs statewide housing programs. They run the statewide mobile home program, and they would pick up a statewide rental housing stabilization service, which they would just integrate this into their existing services. And this would allow them to basically be 211 on steroids. So rather than you calling and saying, I have a problem with my landlord, I need back rent, and I'd say, oh, here, call this number and let you go, I would take you by the hand essentially and bring you to the services that could help you. It's called a warm handoff. And these services would be available to both landlords and tenants. The final piece of our amendment is the issue that came up in H184. You may have heard from your constituents just about the idea that there was a set of rules that went into place through the Department of Health on lead paint removal, where landlords were expected to not only get licensed to do, they had to go through a training and be licensed to do lead paint removal over a 1 square foot area. And then on top of it, in order to get licensed, they needed a piece of insurance, an insurance policy that was very expensive and was not available to them because they were not professional painters. And so there was this weird discrepancy in how the rule was being put into place. And so we created some language to exempt property owners from that perspective, from that prospective insurance. And so hopefully that will allow any of the folks who may have contacted you or complaining how expensive it was about to get, that that has been changed. So that's it on the housing side. I'd just like to point out, again, the struggle in front of us is going to be about people in the motel program, which this bill does not address. The financial demographics are scary. And that is just something that we're going to have to deal with as the last 2 weeks to see if we can figure out a way to help make sure that people have a softer landing than what's in store for them. So with that, any questions for either of us?
Does anyone have any questions? Did they do that good of a job? Well, if you don't have any questions, they may come to you later. So please, if you do have any, you know who to reach. Go to the General and Housing Committee, go to the Environment and Energy Committee, go to either of them, the 2 that just spoke, and let us know in leadership too if you have questions, and make sure they're answered. That was it for today. Thank you both very much for that thorough report. Really appreciate it. And I hope everybody has a great week. Thank you.